Hello and welcome to another episode of Game Theory, the #1 MMA DFS prep show in all of the land.
Who am I?
I'm your host, M.O.N.K, aka the Monk-Matician, and in this very episode, we've got 12 fights at this point. We just lost one to next week's card, much like the Ricky Simone and Song Yadong fight. Mackenzie Dern and Angela Hill was moved to next week's card. It is going to be the headliner, so we now have 12 fights for UFC Charlotte. Coming up this Saturday, early start time, guys. I believe 11:30 Eastern time. So be sure to get this video in and then get your lineups in early. Get your lineups bets in early this week. Yeah, we've got one of my favorite fighters, Yelton Almeida, headlining the card. We've got Johnny Walker, another Omaha guy, Anthony Smith, 2 weeks in a row. Garry, if you're into that whole thing. Machado, excuse me, going against D-Rod. We've got Douglas Silva de Andrade, Carl Williams, and Chase Sherman we get to talk about for a second time. So, guys, without further ado, let's get right into it. UFC Charlotte.
Like a helicopter.
Fight! In the first fight of the night, we've got a women's bantamweight scrap between Jessica Rose Clark and Tainara Lisboa. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that very incorrectly, but 135er here. We've got the return of Jessica Rose Clark and a debutante here in Lisboa. 8,400 for Clark, 7,800 for Lisboa. And immediately I look to see if Lisboa has any submissions, and she does. So automatically Jessica Rose Clark is on notice. Real quick before we get into it, if you look at the top and the bottom line, you'll see the salary, how many KO TKOs, the record there, the sub decision. AWI is ass whoop index, how they usually perform overall in their fights. Anything above 0 is good, anything below is not good. And then we have the pro record. In this case for Clark, it's 11-8, UFC 4-4. L5 is her last 5, or the last 5 professional record over any promotion. 2-3 for Clark in this case. And then you see exact. Exact is, so for instance, we have here a 3-round women's bantamweight fight. So I accumulate stats only for 3-round women's bantamweight fights that Clark has been in and her opponent has been in, and those are the stats that you see here. So only in those 5 fights in which she is 2-3, these are the stats you're seeing on the screen. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's get right into it, guys. Jessica Rose Clark, as I said, 8,400, couple of sub losses, and as I said before, she is 2-3 in 3-round women's bantamweight fights. Clark's overall pacing is pretty good, 3.34 points per minute, outscoring her opponent by about a point per minute. Overall, at distance, she's getting outscored by about 0.75 points per minute. Inside the distance, however, almost 2 points better than her opponent's. DraftKings points per win over her 2 wins at the weight class, 97.67, so not that triple digits that you really want to see, but pretty close to it. And when she loses in 3 losses on average, she gives up 101 to her opponents. 3.5 strikes landed per minute, 66.67% takedown defense, spends 61% of her fight time fighting inside the distance, and controls 75% of that grappling time. Her ceiling is pretty good, 104 points, almost 105, with the floor being 24. Wins over 100, just 1 out of 2 wins over 100. Average bonus points just 37.5. Strength of schedule is okay. You want this to be in the 70s or above, and we are a few points below, so not great. And I do figure that exactly how the BCS used to do for the NCAA football. What do I sound like, the water boy? For the NCAA football, 67.5 strength of schedule, so a little bit below where you'd want to see. But also Clark has yet to make the optimal lineup at the weight class since 2021. As for Tainara Lisboa, I have no stats for her. As I said, no Dana White Contender Series fights, no UFC fights, but we do have a ceiling in the floor, which is just the average for the weight class. And then her strength of schedule is, as you would imagine, the absolute worst on the card. I mean, it takes a lot to get below 50, and she has accomplished that here, Lisboa. 49.49 strength of schedule. That is one of the lower ones I've seen in quite a few weeks. Her last 5 opponents pro record, 7-9. Not only is she fighting cans, but she's fighting cans that have fought no one with minimal records. So, yeah, not looking great here. She's 5-2 in her pro career, 4-1 in her last 5. I can't believe I'm about to say this. I think I favor Jessica Rose Clark here. I know that's probably stupid since she's lost by sub twice and Lisboa has won by submission twice. Jessica's probably going to find her way into an armbar. I would not be surprised. But honestly, she should, I would think, be able to get it done here. I mean, if she can't get it done against someone named Tainara Lisboa, then it's probably time for her to find something else to do, I would imagine. So I can't believe she's going to, the UFC is going to give her another fight if she loses this one. So give me Clark for the win, although I am not comfortable with it. As far as rostering, I don't mind rostering a little bit of both sides here. They're easy to get to at 8,400 and 7,800. And honestly, I would kind of be surprised if this goes the distance. This is a low-level women's MMA fight at 135, and two women that have been finished in the past. Yeah, both women have been subbed out, so I wouldn't be surprised if this one finishes inside the distance. The official pick is Clark somehow. In the second fight of the night, we've got a welterweight clash. The first of a few of them we have on the card between Gabe Green and Bryan Battle. We'll start with Gabe Green here. He is the DraftKings favorite, $8,300, so very close salary to the $7,900 of Battle. Gabe Green 11-4, 2-2 in the UFC, and 2-2 is this exact 3-round welterweight record. Again, those are the stats that we are eyeing both sides of the table today here. So Gabe Green getting outscored by his opponents by 0.8 points a minute at distance, by over half a point per minute, and inside the distance even worse, over 1.5 points per minute. So Gabe Green getting outscored from everywhere, overall at distance and inside the distance. You never want to see that, especially in someone you thought you were favoring heading into a fight here. Average DraftKings points per win over his 2 wins at the weight class, 98.5, and 44 is what he gives up when he wins. When he loses, it's even better. He scores almost 50 and gives up 100.6, lands 6.2 significant strikes per minute, 54% takedown defense, spends 27.5% of his fight time inside the distance, controls just 43% of that grappling time. So some very subpar grappling statistics as well. In fact, the only stat that I am impressed with is his almost 50 points per loss and 6.2 strikes landed per minute. So a high volume guy. But other than that, he is very subpar so far reading these numbers. Very low ceiling of 105, good floor of 51, only 1 win over 100, 50 bonus points on average. The highest strength of schedule on the entire card overall, 79.5, is by far, by a couple of points, the highest strength of schedule. So that should definitely not be overlooked. That's probably the most impressive stat on this whole sheet. His last 5 opponents pro record, 54-9. And Gabe has made the optimal lineup in 1 out of 3 fights. So some very subpar stats, a few good stats, but it's easy to see why he might be subpar if he's fighting the quality of guys that his strength of schedule tells me that he is fighting. Again, 2-2 in his last 4 at the weight class. Meanwhile, Bryan Battle, 8-2 total, 3-1 in the UFC, 1-1 in 3-round welterweight fights. I believe he fought 2 fights at middleweight, if I'm not mistaken. He has dropped down to welterweight for 2 fights. He gets outscored. It's 1 point to basically 6.5. That's absolutely insane. Bryan Battle getting outscored at distance. However, these numbers, I believe he had 1 fight that was extremely short. Takashi Sato, he head kick KO'd, I believe, within a minute. So the striking stats are kind of crazy and need to be kind of thrown out. 9 points a minute to 9, blah, blah, blah. Inside the distance, look at how badly he got dominated by Rinat Fakhretdinov. 0.03 points per minute inside the distance, giving up 5.25. That's ridiculous. 127, almost 128 is what he scored against Sato. He gave up even more than that in a 3-round decision. This dude got a quick win bonus, and he gave up more points than he scored in a decision. 129.5. Significant strikes landed per minute so far at the weight class, 0.64. 22% takedown defense, spent 90.5% of his fight time fighting inside the distance, and controlled 0.23% of that fight time. That's absolutely pathetic. High ceiling, just his 1 win overall in the division. 115 bonus points. Obviously, that was the quick win. Strength of schedule is okay, 74.3, very good. And he has made the optimal lineup. He did make it against Sato, as you would imagine. Guys, he got dominated by Rinat Fakhretdinov. If Gabe Green has any kind of grappling at all, he should be able to handle Bryan Battle pretty decently. He's coming in a few inches shorter and a few inches reach disadvantage, so that probably is not working out in his favor too much. But I like Green overall. I can't trust Battle yet, and I feel like Green could get it done. with a decent game plan. So as far as rostering these guys, I'm not really interested in either one, but both could score well in a finish. So I'm really gonna have to do some more fight tape on it. But as of now, I do favor the Gabe Green side. Next fight's in a weight class you absolutely have to target, but I don't know about this one. Women's flyweight. We've got Ji-Young Kim going against Bohm. Man, what a whatever the opposite of a barn burner is, like a paint drying fight, maybe a grass growing fight.
I don't even want to be around anymore.
8,900 for Ji-Young Kim. What do we get for Ji-Young Kim? She's 9-6-2, 3-6 in the UFC, 2-4 is her exact record in 3-round flyweight fights. 1-4 in her last 5. Overall, she's getting outscored. At distance, it's basically 1-1, and inside the distance, it's 2 points a minute to over 3 points a minute allowed. DraftKings points per win, guys. Strap in, because over both of her wins at the weight class, 62.39. Just absolutely terrible. When she loses, she scores almost that many points, actually. 45, almost 46. Gives up only 78.5. Somehow lands 6.23 strikes a minute. 42% takedown defense. I mean, she doesn't spend much time inside the distance, controls less than half the grappling time. Her ceiling is almost as high as her floor, or almost as low as her floor is high. I've never seen a ceiling this close to a floor. 67.5 to 62.77. No fights in which she's won over 100, 30 bonus points per win, decent strength of schedule, has made the optimal 0 times. Now, Bohm tends to be what her name suggests, but maybe she won't lose her third fight here, we'll see. So far, in 2 fights, I believe one was to Victoria Leonardo and the other to Ariane Lipski, she's scoring 1.5 points a minute and getting 4 points a minute put on her. At distance, it's 1.3 to 3.5, and inside the distance, it's even worse, 0.78 points per minute offensively. Defensively, she's taking 3.62. No wins. When she loses, she scores 23. She gives up 88. Less than 3 strikes landed a minute. 71.5% takedown defense, so pretty decent there. Spends 43% of her time in the distance. Controls only 11% of that time. Low ceiling, low floor. No wins, 61.85 strength of schedule, and has yet to make the optimal lineup. Guys, I don't know how I'm going to say this. Normally, I would fade this fight entirely. Don't play either side. It's not even worth it. You can't play Ji-Young Kim. She's basically unplayable at 8,900. If she wins and makes the optimal lineup, it is a complete anomaly because she scores 62 points when she wins, and she's 1-4 in her last 5, guys. So please understand that. These are trends, obviously, but this one is a huge freaking trend. I mean, come on. If obviously, like I said, if she wins, it would be a complete anomaly. So give me the dog here. I can't believe I'm saying this. 7,300. I will have some of Bohm rostered. Her numbers are absolute trash. Every single number I read except for her takedown defense is absolute trash. But overall, she doesn't allow a ton of points. 88 points on average when she's lost. In fact, she gave up, it hasn't been much, so I don't think she's given up 100 points yet in any of her fights. So give me Bohm. Hopefully she can beat Ji-Young Kim, maybe get a gross split decision and score like 60, 70 points at 7,300. Because, guys, there's some people at the top of the list, and Almeida, that I really want to get to this week. So I'm going to need some cheaper fighters, and I'm definitely not paying 89 for Kim. I'll probably X her out of my lineup. Again, anomaly if she makes it. So give me Bohm at 73. It's just the smart play, in my opinion, at this point, even though it's probably not smart. And here we have a 3-round lightweight scrap that was supposed to happen, I believe, last week. They got moved to this week. One corner, we've got Natan Levy, 9,100, going against Pete Rodriguez, 7,100. Little 2-fight UFC veteran here. His numbers are ridiculous and should not be trusted. In fact, his total fight time in 2 fights is 4.5 minutes. So you basically got to throw all these numbers out. In one fight, he got smashed by Jack Della Maddalena, and in the other fight, he smashed one of the worst fighters we've ever seen in Mike Jackson. So, you got to throw a lot of these numbers out. I mean, you can look at them. They're very impressive, and some of them are impressive more so for his opponents than for himself, but every single category has a number that's either extremely low or extremely high. The one I want you to look at is his strength of schedule here, 58.5 60.9 is an extremely low number. I said anything below 70. If you're below 60, I mean, it's no 50 like Lisboa, but we're freaking close. We're in the 50s here. His last 5 opponents pro record, 17-13, has not made the optimal lineup. He's 5-1, I should mention overall, 4-1 in his last 5. Let's see. Somehow I have him at 0-2 for 3-round lightweight fights. That doesn't make any sense to me. Let me go take a look at that just super quick. If you don't mind. I hate when I probably just typed it in wrong. Oh, that's his that can't be right. His UFC career? I must have typed it in wrong. He's 1-1. He's got no fights at this weight class. So actually these are his career numbers. His last 2, I believe, one was at catchweight, or no, it was at welterweight. That's what's going on. He's dropping down. So yeah, on top of fighting a killer in Levy, Rodriguez is also dropping down a weight class. Natan Levy's the side I'll be interested in. We've got orthodox or southpaw versus switch rather, with Levy being the southpaw. 4.28 points a minute, outscoring his opponents by a full point per minute. At distance, it's about half a point. Inside the distance, it's well over 2 points, 2.3 points a minute over his opponents, 6.74 to 4.46 inside the distance. Scores 108 over his 2 wins at the weight class, in which he is 2-1 in 3-round lightweight fights. When he loses, he gives up 93, scores 37, so both respectable numbers there. 4.5 strikes landed a minute, an atrocious 37.5% takedown defense. Spends 37% of his time fighting inside the distance, controls over 50%. I'll call it 55% of the grappling time he's involved in. A very high ceiling at 119.77, a decent floor, which is just what he scored in his 1 loss. And then let's see, one of his wins over 100. Average bonus points per win is 30, so he put up over 100 in a decision. You do love to see that as a DraftKings player. Over 70 strength of schedule, just barely, but still it's over 70. And Natan has made the optimal lineup in 1 of his 3 fights in the weight class. I really like Natan this week. I don't mind him as a 9K fighter at all because Pete Rodriguez is either kill or be killed. And in this case, I think Levy's talent is much higher than Mike Jackson's talent was. So I don't think Pete Rodriguez, I mean, I'm not going to say has much of a chance, but I think Levy should have him covered absolutely everywhere. So I think he's going to use his wrestling, could score very well in a decision, or more likely a finish here over Rodriguez. I don't know if I'm going to get to any Rodriguez at all. 7,100, not really interested in him. I mean, I know he's put up good offensive numbers, but again, guys, that was his 1 fight against the worst fighter we've seen at welterweight, basically, in Mike Jackson. So give me Natan Levy. 9,100, I think we're priced appropriately. It is expensive, but I think we're where we need to be. So, yeah, make room for in some of your lineups here for Natan Levy. Maybe he'd pair well with Almeida. Guys, I'm just going to tell you now, Almeida's going in 100% of my lineup. So, yeah, you just got to find somebody else to pair him with in that 9K range, and I think you'll be pretty good. Fight! Up next, we've got a 3-round light heavyweight fight between Carlos Ulberg and Ihor Potieria. One week we got Drew Dober. The next week we've got Carlos Ulberg. What is going on here in the UFC? Yeah, light heavyweight fight here. MMA math here is very simple. Ulberg knocked out Nicky Gums in the first round, and Ihor Potieria got knocked out in the second round by Nicky Gums in his UFC debut. So there you go. It's going to be Ulberg all day. But MMA math aside, overall his pacing phenomenal. 4.6 to 1.8 is fantastic. At distance, 4.3 to 1.74 allowed, and inside the distance, surprisingly, which isn't much time as we'll find out in a second, 10.5 points to just 2.5 points per minute. So almost 5 times as many points as his opponents. I guess just a little more than 4, I should say. DraftKings points per win for Ulberg. In his 3 wins, he is 3-1 in the UFC, and 3-1 in 3-round light heavyweight fights. 93.84, allowing just 2.62 when he wins. That is nothing. When he loses in his 1 loss, he scored 58.5 and allowed 113.35. Ulberg lands 8.5 strikes per minute, a 100% takedown defense thus far into his career. He spends 6.83% of his fight time fighting inside the distance, controls 76.72% of that fight time. So not a lot of time spent inside the distance, but when he is there, he's controlling it for the most part about 3-1. Ceiling 110.95, a very good floor, which is just his one loss. Obviously, with only one loss, I have nothing to base standard deviation on, so that's where we get that number. 2 of his 3 wins over triple digits, 70 bonus points per win. I think that's the highest number we've seen so far. 73.53 strength of schedule, so only 4 fights into the UFC, but he's got a pretty good strength of schedule. I mean, his first fight was Kennedy and Chukwu. That's a difficult one. Then he beat the Water Buffalo. Then he beat Tafon and Chukwu. Then he beat Nicky Gums. So 47-15 his last 5 opponent pro record. Has made the optimal lineup twice out of 4 times since 2021 at the weight class. So there we've finally got some decent DraftKings numbers here for a fighter. And I really like Carlos Ulberg this week. Ihor Potieria, I just don't know, man. Like I said, got knocked out by Nicky Gums, and then beat who was an already pretty much retired Mauricio Shogun Hua. Overall, Ihor's getting outscored 3-4 basically. At distance, 3.5-2, so very good, but inside the distance is where he is lacking. 1.53 points a minute, allowing over 6. 110 when he won, gave up 111 when he lost. 4.6 strikes landed a minute. 33% takedown defense, no bueno. Spends 37% of his fight time fighting inside the distance. Controls a measly 13.5% of that fight time. So some opposite type numbers here in the grappling department compared to Ulberg. Again, his floor and ceiling is just what he's scored so far in his 1 fight each. 90 bonus points is what he put up in his win. 64 strength of schedule. So his strength of schedule is almost 10 points lower than Ulberg. That could make a huge difference here. And Ihor has yet to make the optimal lineup. I should say he is 19-3 as a pro. 1-1 in the UFC, 4-1 in his last 5. And 1-1 in 3-round lightweight fights. Again, that's where we see all these stats on the screen. So guys, I like Ulberg. I think Potieria, this is probably some recency bias if people are onto him. He beat a basically retired Mauricio Shogun Hua. I'm not impressed with him so far. I did enjoy his little dance. A lot of people didn't like that. It's like, well, then don't let him win if you don't want him to dance. How about that? So, you know, it was against a legend. Who cares? I'm sick of all these like baseball, old school baseball, like unwritten rules, things you can and can't do. That shit is so like 19th century backwards ass thinking. Like, just if you don't want him to do shit, don't let him win. So I know that was a little tangent, but I think Ulberg is gonna get the finish here most likely. And even if he doesn't, I'm hoping he can go to a decision. Has he ever been to a decision? He's been to 1 against Fabio Charant. He did not score well. So hopefully Ulberg finds a finish here and we can get a bit of him in our lineups. Again, you pair him with Jailton, you're going to need some lower level guys. I think you could make a couple of lineups there. And Ihor, 5% maybe. I don't think he can get it done here. Next up, we've got a bantamweight fight between Cody Stamann and Douglas Silva de Andrade. Man, I love watching Silva de Andrade fight. Look at those eyes. We've got 8,500 for Stamann, who is 21-5-1 as a pro, 7-4-1 in the UFC, 2-3 in his last 5, 5-4-1 in 3-round bantamweight fights. So we've got 10 fights worth of stats that we are going off. Let's take a look at him. He's outscoring his opponents, you know, just barely, but he is 3-2.7 at distance. Again, very close. We'll call it 2 to 1.7. Inside the distance, outscoring his opponents as well by almost a full point per minute. DraftKings points when he wins in those 5 wins, guys, at the division, 83.5 points. That's it. If he's not fighting Eddie Wineland, he's just really not scoring any points is what it boils down to. So, and Douglas Silva de Andrade is no Eddie Wineland. When he loses in his 4 losses, 100 points is what he's giving up on average. 4 strikes a minute, a very good 76% takedown defense, spends 31% of his time inside the distance, controls well over half at 59% of the grappling time, a decent ceiling, and a very high floor, 38.62. I wouldn't say very high, but decently high. Only 1 of those 5 wins has he put up triple digits. Again, that's the Eddie Wineland fight, and he did go way over, 137. But again, we're not fighting Eddie Wineland here. 47 bonus points per win. And did he finish Wineland in the first minute? He did. So he got 115, averaged that all together with the other bonus points per win, and we're all the way down at 47. 73.83 strength of schedule is very respectable. A palindromic last 5 opponents record at 82-28. And he has made the optimal lineup in the Eddie Wineland fight, obviously, 1 time out of 4 chances at the division since 2021. So other than the Wineland fight, like I said, not great DraftKings output from Cody Stamann. And if you take that fight out, he is 4-4-1 in the division. So some decent grappling numbers, but that's about it. But that's what you expect when you get Cody Stamann. Lots of decisions and some pretty low DraftKings scores. Douglas Silva de Andrade. Let's check him out. 7,700, 28-5 as a pro, 6-5 in the UFC, 3-2 in his last 5, 5-3 in 3-round bantamweight fights. Basically even with his pacing, 2.85 to 2.73. At distance, he's outscoring his opponents by 0.6 points a minute. Inside the distance, it's the opposite of Stamann, well over a point per minute. He's getting outscored 3.3 to 4.75. DraftKings points per win, basically, actually, no, it's not. It's 7 points better than Stamann at 90.78, so still nothing to write home about at barely over 90. And when he loses, he's also giving up triple digits, 100. It's barely 100, but it is 100. 3.87 strikes landed per minute. A good 71% takedown defense, spends 19% of his fight time inside the distance, controls less than half, but just barely, 46% of the grappling time. Decent ceiling and a 12-point lower floor than Stamann. 2 of his 5 wins in the weight class have been over 100 instead of just 1. Better bonus points per win at 53, a better strength of schedule at 75.9, and he has made the optimal lineup 1 more time than Stamann, 2 out of 3 attempts for Douglas Silva de Andrade. Guys, we are going for it again. It's been a roller coaster with Silva de Andrade. He beat Renan Barão, lost to Lerone Murphy, beat Gaetano Pereiro, beat Sergey Morozov, scored 120 points in that fight, and then lost a very close fight to Said Nurmagomedov, in which he would have probably only scored like 60 points, maybe less than that. So it's been a roller coaster with Andrade. We're going back to the well, baby. When he wins, he scores decently. And it's a better number than Stamann. So give me Andrade at 7,700. Hopefully Andrades don't screw me over 2 weeks in a row. I don't even, it's just bringing back my trauma, as the kids say. I have trauma now with people named Andrade. Cody Stamann, I don't mind a little of him. He just does not score well, guys. Again, if you're not Eddie Wineland, I don't know how Cody Stamann's going to score well against you. We might have another anomaly fighter, much like Kim. So I'll probably be a little bit of both sides. I imagine I'll have more ownership with Silva de Andrade than I will with Cody Stamann. Fight! Next fight shouldn't take long because I've done this already, and it seems pretty one-sided still. A 3-round heavyweight fight that involves Chase Sherman, so we'll see if it actually happens. Chase Sherman going against Carl Williams. This was supposed to happen 2 or 3 weeks ago. Williams is expensive this week, 9,400, and I think it could be worth it. 8-1 as a pro, 1-0 in the UFC. He looked fantastic against Lukasz Brzeski, scoring almost 139 points on him here. These are just the Brzeski stats. 6.67 points a minute, allowing 1. At distance, he even doubled him up. Inside the distance, it's not even close. 6 to 0.23. Like I said, scored 130. Only 2.5 strikes landed a minute. 100% takedown defense. Brzeski apparently tried to take him down. 71% of that fight was spent fighting inside the distance, and Williams controlled 95.5% of that grappling time. That's going to be a lot of points right there. Let's see, 30 points in the decision win. So he scored 100 points without the bonus, Carl Williams, in a 3-round fight, guys. 59 strength of schedule, so not a good strength of schedule. That's the one number on here that is pretty bad. His opponent's last 5 record, his last 5 opponents' pro record, I should say, 28-19, and did make the optimal lineup. Chase Sherman, he's 4-10 in the UFC, 4-10 in 3-round heavyweight fights, 1-4 in his last 5. He scores 3 a minute. Gets 3.5 a minute put on him. At distance, he's getting outscored, and inside the distance, he's scoring 2.8, but allowing 6.2. Guys, you don't want to allow 6 points a minute when you're facing a guy named Carl Williams who scores 6 points a minute inside the distance. So yeah, that stat right there, Sherman allowing over 6 while Williams scores 6 inside the distance, is basically why I will be on Williams in this fight. Sherman does score well per win, 102 in his 4 wins. When he loses, only allows 94 on average, 6.3 strikes a minute, 67% takedown defense. You can rest assured that will be tested this week, or this weekend, I should say. Sherman spends 11% of his time inside the distance, controls only 36% of that time. 120 point ceiling, a good floor in 40. 3 of his 4 wins in triple digits. Love to see that, 53.75. So when he does win, and they are few and far between, he generally scores well. 70, so 12 point better, almost 13 point better. Nope. To almost 12 point better strength of schedule, 70.92. And Chase, believe it or not, has made the optimal lineup in 1 of 6 attempts at the weight class since 2021. He's only 6,800, guys. The question is, and the only question is he worth even rostering a little bit? Rest assured, and I've said that twice in this clip, which is weird. But how about this? Please believe that I will be rostering my fair share of Williams. Nothing's changed since his fight was supposed to go off a couple weeks ago. I think Williams can dominate Sherman here with the takedowns, with the trips, and the ground control time. So give me Williams all day. Like I said, the only question is how much Sherman can you or should you play? I think he's probably maybe worth 5%. I mean, really, I think it's minimal amounts of Sherman here, 6,800. I think you need to go dog hunting elsewhere this week. I could be wrong. Williams only has 1 fight, and it was against Lucas Brzeski. Sherman is probably better than Brzeski, but probably not by much as far as the level things go. So give me Williams here by a decision, hopefully, in which he scores a gazillion points via wrestling and control time. Fight! 80 years old is the combined age of these two fighters, Court McGee and the immortal Matt Brown. What an appropriate nickname. I wonder if he knew that was going to be the case back when he chose it, but because, man, Matt Brown will never die. He's like a goonie. Court McGee, $8,700 this week, so $750 over his average salary in his last 5 fights. I mean, very expensive for McGee going against Brown here. McGee, let's see here, 0-2 as far as KO TKOs in the welterweight three round welterweight fights, I should say. 6-6 decisions, has a very good ass whip index of 23.84. Let's see, he's 21-11 as a pro, 10-10 in the UFC, 2-3 in his last 5, and 6-8 in 3-round welterweight fights. He's overall, he's outscoring his opponents by an entire point per minute. At distance, it's basically even, but inside the distance, Court McGee is shining 4 points a minute, allowing just 1.8. Scores about 90 points per win in those 6 wins at the division. When he loses, on average, 84.5 is what he's giving up. So not many points over that 8 fight sample size. 4.13 strikes landed per minute. A decent 64.71% takedown defense. You would want that to be a bit higher. 70 is pretty much as low as you would like to see it, but we're pretty close there. Spends 34% of his total fight time fighting inside the distance and controls a very good 80.55% of that grappling time. So some very good grappling statistics here between the inside the distance pacing, the grappling time, and the time spent inside the distance. So a pretty low ceiling at 102. A decent floor, 47.8. Only one of the 6 wins I mentioned has Court McGee put up over 100 points, 30 bonus points per win. So straight up decisions, like I said, all decisions in 3-round welterweight wins, 73 strength of schedule, and Court has made the optimal lineup in 1 of his 3 fights at the weight class since 2021. So some okay numbers from Court McGee, nothing that's groundbreaking, but the thing that jumps out to me is his grappling numbers that seem a bit above average. The other thing that jumps out to me is his his inability to score really well, and being higher than his average salary by almost $800 is a pretty big red flag if you're presenting numbers like that to me. So probably be lower than the field on Court McGee if I had to guess, just from these numbers. Matt Brown getting outscored overall 3.16 to 3.6. I should mention he's 23-19 as a pro, 16-13 in the UFC, also 2-3 in his last 5. 15-12 in 3-round welterweight fights. So we have a 27 fight sample size, the highest we've ever had. So that's what stats you're seeing on the screen. Getting outscored overall. At distance, he's doing okay, 2.95 to 2.7, but inside the distance, he is getting outscored by 0.7 points a minute. Not something you want to happen when you're going against Court McGee, as we just talked about his grappling statistics. But Brown with the better DraftKings points per win, almost 100 points per win, and this is over 15 wins. And when he loses, it's it's virtually identical. Almost 100 points per loss is what he's giving up. 3.5 strikes landed a minute, 64.6% takedown defense, so virtually identical with Court McGee's takedown defense. Spends 59% of his fight time fighting inside the distance. That is a significantly higher amount of time than McGee, and controls just 39% of that time. A decent ceiling of 114, a decent floor of 42.5, 6 of 15 wins over 100 points, 70 bonus points per win. That is a damn good number. 68 strength of schedule, so not great, but not terrible. And Matt Brown has made the optimal lineup in 1 out of 3 tries since 2021. So, like I said, I'll probably be a bit under on McGee. I'd be interested to see in what the field is on Brown. I might go a bit over, but honestly, I think McGee should be able to get this done. Matt Brown has got to retire at some point, guys. He is 42 years old. In fact, he's 42 years, 3 months is his exact age. So at one point or another, he's got to retire. I know his nickname is the Immortal. Against a tough guy like Court McGee, if he takes a beating, I mean, Matt Brown's a tough son of a bitch. I'm not saying he's going to retire, but it's coming. So I like McGee to win, but I don't think you can play him a ton. I guess I'll have some of Brown, but probably around the field. And here we've got another 3-round welterweight fight between Alex Morono and Tim the Dirty Bird Means. We'll start with Tim Means. 7,400 this week, and he is outscoring his opponents by about 0.6 points a minute. At distance, it's exactly half a point per minute, and inside the distance, it's 0.22 points a minute. So he's outscoring his opponents from pretty much everywhere. Scores only 89.83 points per win, and I should mention he's 14-11 is Tim Means in the UFC, 3-2 in his last 5, and 10-9 in 3-round welterweight fights. So again, a huge sample size. This whole fight, actually, both sides, gigantic sample sizes for these stats here. But in those 10 wins, on average, he's only scoring 89 points a win. That is not what you're looking for, even at 7,400. I guess at 7,400 that would be pretty good, but yeah, you want it to be at least in the 90s, you would hope. And when he loses, though, he's not giving up a ton of points, scoring 30, giving up only 91, 4.75 points a minute, 66% takedown defense, 27, almost 28% of his fight time fighting inside the distance, and controls just over 51% of that fight time. An average floor, an average ceiling, a very good floor at 48.9. Let's see here. 4 of his 10 wins, he has gone over triple digits. A very respectable 57.5 bonus points per win. A good strength of schedule at almost 72. Has yet to make the optimal lineup since 2021, however, coming in 0 for 3. So I like some of Tim Means' numbers here. I'm going to be rooting for Tim Means. I think Alex Morono probably gets it done. He was beating Santiago Ponzinibbio until he wasn't late into that 3rd round. Meanwhile, Tim Means has dropped his last 2 to Kevin Holland and a split decision that was a very close fight to Max Griffin back in late October. Did beat Nicholas Dalby, though. That's a decent win. Did beat Mike Perry as well before that. Meanwhile, Alex Morono's beating guys like Donald Cerrone in the year 2021, David Zawada, Mickey Gall, and Matthew Semmelsberger. Give me Alex Morono here. I'll be rooting for Tim Means, and I'll probably be fading this fight as a whole. Although I do think if someone gets a finish, it's probably Morono, so I might have at 8,800. That's going to be really difficult. He's just outpricing himself, in my lineup. So I'm probably going to be under on Alex Morono, even though he could get a finish win here. Up next, we've got another 3-round welterweight fight on the card. This one between Ian Machado Garry and Daniel Rodriguez. 7,200 for Rodriguez. It should be noted, Rodriguez 200-0 in prison fights and street fights put together. So just something to keep in mind there. His overall pacing is pretty good. 3.86 points a minute, allowing just 3.21. At distance, he's outscoring his opponents by well over a point and a half, 4.21 to 2.45. But inside the distance, it's a completely different story, guys. Rodriguez scoring just 1.64 points a minute, allowing 5.5 points back at him. That is not good. Scores 102 points on average in 6 wins. And in his 2 losses, only 82 points per loss is what he's giving up. An astonishing 7.72 strikes landed per minute, with a takedown defense of 65.63%, so just a bit subpar. Spends 19% of his fight time fighting inside the distance, controls only 20% of that grappling time. Rodriguez with a ceiling of 115, almost 116, and a decent floor, 38.83. Let's see, 3 of his 6 wins over triple digits. and Rodriguez scores 56.67 bonus points on average per win. A decent strength of schedule at 71.01, but he has yet to make the optimal lineup in welterweight fights since 2021. So some decent pacing numbers from Rodriguez, except for inside the distance. That's where I would be most worried. But going against Ian Machado Garry, you'll see he does not have the greatest inside the distance numbers of his own. So this could be a good matchup for Daniel Rodriguez at 7,200. And you get the other side where you're paying $9K for Ian Machado Garry. Definitely some recency bias. He's beaten Jordan Williams, Darian Weeks, Gabe Green, and Song Kanon. So yeah, definite recency bias. He is 11-0, 4-0 in the UFC, 4-0 in 3-round welterweight fights. He's also 11 years younger than Daniel Rodriguez, which could be interesting. Machado's pace, 0.9 points a minute better than his opponent. At distance, 3.83, allowing just 2.1, but inside the distance, he's getting outscored by 2.5 points a minute. 2 points scored to 4.5 points given up per minute. Only puts up 93.1 per win in his 4 wins so far in the UFC. Lands a high number here. Strikes per minute, 6.79. Still almost 1 significant strike less landed than D-Rod. 63.64 takedown defense, so just about the same as Rodriguez. Not great, not terrible. Spends only 18% of his fight time inside the distance, controls only 24% of the grappling time, so very similar to Daniel Rodriguez insofar as we do not have great grappling numbers here. 111 ceiling, 26-point floor, so not quite as good as his opponent. Let's see here. 2 of 4 wins over 100. Average bonus points per win, 48.75. A barely 70 strength of schedule, but it is 70, and it's exactly 1 point lower than D-Rod. But Machado, unlike Rodriguez, has made the optimal lineup once out of 4 tries at the weight class since 2021. I'm interested in the dog angle here. The Daniel Rodriguez side at 7,200. I think 9K is too much for what you get with Machado. He put up 109 against Jordan Williams, who's terrible, 62 against Weeks, 95 against Green, and 105, almost 106 against Song Kanon. So he is going up in his scoring as far as, fight by fight. He's 9K this week, guys. He is, let's see, actually 200 cheaper than his average. He put up 106 almost against Song. He was 9,300. But last time he was 9,200, he put up 61. So you really don't know with Machado Garry. I'd be extra careful here. I'm going to have more Rodriguez than Machado. In fact, 7,200. And I assume a lot of people are going to be on Rodriguez this week. I assume this is going to be a very high-owned fight because a lot of people like Ian Machado Garry, and a lot of people think Daniel Rodriguez could bounce back and get the win here after losing to Neil Magny. I believe he got finished in that fight. Yeah, he got subbed late in the 3rd round, so he's going to be looking for a rebound. 7,200 is a great spot to get him at, and like I said, you're going to need some lower price guys to get some higher price guys. I will have my fair share of Rodriguez, but I do think he will be a very popular dog this week. And we have arrived at the co-main event of the evening, a light heavyweight bout between Johnny Walker and Anthony Lionheart Smith. 402 stand-up Omaha, another Omaha guy, 2 weeks in a row. Drew Dober last week, Anthony Smith this week. Hopefully we have a better outcome here, but I don't know, man. Johnny Walker could be an interesting fight. 8,200 for Walker this week. 6-4 in the UFC, 3-2 in his last 5, 6-2 in 3-round light heavyweight fights. He's getting outscored in a couple of categories here. 4.29 overall is what he scores. Takes 5.18. That's what gets scored against him. At distance, 6.5 points, allowing 5. So he's outscoring by 1.5, which is very good. But he's allowing 5 points a minute inside the distance. That's a crazy high number. Inside the distance, it's not even close. Scores just 2.77. Allows well over 4. 4.3. DraftKings points per win in his 6 wins. 113.5 on average. When he loses, he gives up 110 on average. So Johnny Walker fights, especially at this price, could be very lucrative as far as DraftKings goes. 3.5 strikes landed a minute. A terrible 46.15% takedown defense. Spends 72.5% of his fight time fighting inside the distance. Controls only 27% of that fight time. Why? You have to ask yourself why you would spend 72% of your fight time fighting inside the distance if you can't fight very well inside the distance. This is a question you must ask yourself, along with Johnny Walker. Pretty good ceiling, 123.34, 35-point floor. All 6, this is a very good stat. All 6 of his wins in 3-round light heavyweight fights, he's put up over 100 points, guys. All 6. 98.33 bonus points per win on average over 6 fights. That is incredibly difficult to do. Strength of schedule is decent, 71.65, and Johnny has made the optimal lineup once out of 2 fights at the weight class in 3-round light heavyweight fights, I should say, since 2021. So some very good numbers, some very porous numbers defensively for Johnny Walker, especially when you get to inside the distance. But as far as wins and bonus points and all that, at distance pacing, some very, very good numbers. Anthony Smith getting outscored in a major way. 11-7 in the UFC, 3-2 in his last 5, 2-1 in 3-round light heavyweight fights, scoring just 2.32 points a minute, allowing 3.89. At distance, he's outscoring his opponents by 1.3 points a minute. Inside the distance, 0.81 is what he scores per minute. That is, might as well say 0. He's allowing 6.88 points per minute inside the distance. I mean, come on, both of these guys giving up points inside the distance like it's nothing. But Smith, much like Walker, a very high number per win. In his 2 wins, 114.09 is what he's averaging. 96 is what he gave up in his loss, 3.56 strikes landed a minute. And even worse than Johnny Walker's takedown defense is Anthony Smith's 25%, spends 32, almost 33% of his fight time fighting inside the distance, controls only 21% of the grappling time. Guys, if we see grappling in this match, it's going to be by accident. 127.5 point ceiling, very low floor for Anthony Smith, but that's only his 1 loss, I should say, in which he scored 9.33. Both of his wins triple digits, 102.5 bonus points per win on average, 75.64 strength of schedule. Anthony Smith, despite putting up 2 triple digit scores, has yet to make the optimal lineup at light heavyweight in 3-round fights. I think he made it against Stamann, but that was a 5-round fight. Even though it was at light heavyweight, we are not taking that into account. I like both sides here. I'm going to have both sides rostered, to be honest. Both sides score very, very well when they win in 3-round light heavyweight fights. That said, I'm going to have more Walker. I'm going to be rooting for Smith. Again, he's an Omaha guy. I'm an Omaha guy. But I think Walker is going to be able to get it done. I will have more Walker at 8,200 than I will have Smith at 8,000. But I do think the winner scores very, very well. And I think this is a great fight to target. And we have arrived at the main event, one in which I'm very excited for at least one side of it. Yelton Almeida, one of my favorite fighters to watch, one of my favorite fighters from a stat perspective, is taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik in a 5-round heavyweight fight. Let's start with Rozenstruik, 7-4 in the UFC, 2-3 in his last 5, 2-2 in 5-round heavyweight fights. His pacing is awful. This is like worse than Derek Lewis. 1.52 overall, 1.6 at distance, 0.82 points scored per minute inside the distance. He gives up 4.31 points a minute inside the distance. And I don't know if you heard this or if you saw it, but he's fighting Yelton Almeida. Rozenstruik, 98 points per win in his 2 wins, 2.68 points a minute, 83% takedown defense, controls only 1% of the grappling time he's involved in. 1 freaking percent. 1 win over 100, very good strength of schedule at 77.16, and has made the optimal lineup in 1 of his 2 wins. But guys, he's fighting Yelton Almeida. So those are all the stats we're going to go over from Rozenstruik. If he doesn't KO you early, he scores very, very poorly. You cannot roster Rozenstruik unless you think he's going to KO Almeida. Now that said, at 6,600, I will have maybe a little bit. If I don't go 100% Almeida, I'll probably go like 95.5. 90-10, something like that. But Yelton Almeida, I mean, he's actually Movsar outscored him in 4 fights by 1 point a minute as of last week, or 1 point overall as of last week. But before that, Yelton is like the first or second best DraftKings scorer overall out of like 830 fighters that I track, guys. It's Yelton Almeida, number 1 with a bullet. He scores almost 7 points a minute while allowing basically 0. At distance, he's completely even, but it might as well say 0. Inside the distance, 6.45 points a minute to 0. He has not allowed a single point per minute, not a 1/10 of a point per minute, not a 100th point per minute. DraftKings points per win in 4 wins. And like I said, I should have said actually, Yelton is 4-0 in the UFC, 0-0, has no 5-round heavyweight fights. These are just his numbers career-wise for the UFC. 119.54 is what he scored. 5.52 strikes landed a minute for a grappler. 90, and a lot of those are ground and pound probably. 95% of his total fight time spent fighting inside the distance. He controls 100% of that fight time, guys. 100%. He hasn't given up control, not 1 second of control time for the entire time he's been fighting inside the distance. All 4 of his wins well over triple digits. 85 bonus points on average per win. 92.54 strength of schedule, which is a pretty damn good strength of schedule for only having four UFC fights, especially in this division, knowing some of the fighters that are here. 4 times out of 4 since 2021, he has made the optimal lineup. He's one of, I think, 3 fighters to do that out of, again, 830 fighters, guys. It's him, it's Andre Petroski, and it's Movsar Evloev after last week. The only other thing I would say, in 4 fights, Yelton's put up 478 DraftKings points. He has allowed 5. 478 points he's scored. He's allowed 5.2. That's a DraftKings ratio of 92 to 1. He's outscoring his opponents 92 to 1, guys. He's the only fighter, I believe, that's ever made the optimal lineup at $9,700. They put him at $9,700 last time. He made it. Somehow I didn't have him rostered in 100% of lineups. He made it at $9,700. Actually, twice someone's made it. I don't remember off the top of my head who the other one is, but Almeida was definitely the last one to do it. Guys, I'm going to play, like I said, 90 to 100% of Yelton Almeida, probably closer to 100%. I think he gets it done, obviously, inside the distance. Rozenstruik cannot grapple. If he does not land that huge shot, which hopefully Almeida can avoid in the first minute or 2, I think this is all downhill for Rozenstruik. He's going to be on his back. He's not going to have a clue as what to do. 1% control time overall. And he's going to get absolutely dominated and possibly finished. I don't think he'll get KO'd, but I think he'll get TKO'd. I think this is a ground and pound finish where the ref stops the fight, or Almeida could just submit him whenever he wanted, most likely. So Yelton Almeida is going to be number 1 with a bullet for me this week, and he's going to be in more lineups than I can count. Guys, before we get out of here, we've just got 2 things left to do, so let's get right in to CM Monk's picks for UFC Charlotte.
Oh, fuck. A clown pewter? Fuck that. Probably got no game.
As promised, here's an early look at CM Monk's picks for UFC Charlotte. Guys, last week, CM Monk absolutely killed it. 9-12 he went, 75%, and you can't see it on here, but under projection method, CM Monk went 12 of 12. He hit every single distance prop there was. And I don't do like specific round 1, round 2. He just says whether it's going to finish like inside the distance or whether it's going to go to decision. And he hit all 12 of them. Never have I seen anything like that before. He had a killer week. That puts him year to date 114 out of 179 fights for a great 63.69%, 64% if you're rounding up for CM Monk on the year. Absolutely killing it compared to last year. But guys, let's get right into it. First fight, Jessica Rose Clark over Lisboa decision. Then we've got an underdog, Brian Battle over Gabe Green by decision. Ji Young Kim over Mandy Bohm decision. Natan Levy over Pete Rodriguez by decision. Interesting. I'm thinking finish there, but hey, who am I to question the perfect CM Monk? Carlos Ulberg over Ihor Potieria by finish. Cody Stamann getting the loss to Douglas Silva de Andrade by decision, underdog decision win. Carl Williams dominating Chase Sherman by finish. Court McGee finishing Matt Brown. Alex Morono losing to Tim Means by decision in our third underdog pick of the card. Mackenzie Dern's no longer on the card, so ignore that one.
I didn't fucking do that!
Ian Machado Garry over Daniel Rodriguez by decision. Johnny Walker over Anthony Smith by finish. Not so good for my Omaha guy. And Yelton Almeida over Jairzinho Rozenstruik by finish, guys. That's how CM Monk sees things this week for UFC Charlotte. One thing left to do. Let's check out Monk's pick of the week. Most owned, no nonsense pick of the week for UFC Charlotte. Guys, I'm going to be honest with you. It has been a rough go. Last week we picked Jessica Andrade and she lost in like, what, 6 seconds? I mean, it was ridiculous. We've been on a tough run.
Oh my God. I made it!
If you've been going against me, mad props to you because you've made all the money and all the DraftKings money. This week, guys, I'm not fucking around. I'm just not fucking around. My most owned, no-nonsense pick of the week, the Monk pick of the week, is none other than the best DraftKings player available, the second best DraftKings player overall, first if you look at certain stats, and that's going to be Almeida at 9,600, guys. You'd be a fool not to roster this guy. If Rozenstruik KOs him in the first minute, again, anomaly. Like, okay, fine, whatever. But the dude, it's not like he's a rookie. 20 pro fights Almeida has. I think that's more than Rozenstruik has overall. 9,600 for Almeida. I think there's value on that number. I think we're looking at an early finish, and even if we're not seeing a finish, we're seeing a very high scoring decision in my opinion. So by far my highest owned, most owned, no nonsense pick of the week, the Monk pick of the week, is going to be Almeida at 9,600. We're not fucking around this week. That's going to take care of it, guys. UFC Charlotte is in the bag, as they say. Game theory is all wrapped up. Man, what a great card that we just went over. I am extremely excited to see Almeida fight. You guys have no idea. I mean, I'm not on an island or anything with this one, but I absolutely love watching that guy fight. I'm a fan of grappling as it was, and he seems to be in the upper echelon. We've got a good co-main too. Johnny Walker, little Anthony Smith, some decent fights on the main card, even on the prelims as well. And you know what? There's only one thing left to do, guys, to wrap up this week's game theory. And that is to say, I hope you all enjoy the fight. So, enjoy, and we will see you in the next one.